Shalom. First and foremost, like to give all praise to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakakadash, double honors, the and apostles of Great Millstone, who are teachers of truth and sincerity, and shout out to Yakims out there in the four quarters that you're proclaiming this truth. Braka the Yahweh, Braka the Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakakadash, Brakatum. So, out here another week prophesying the downfall of Babylon the Great, America and the Scriptures, and like everything else, so I don't always say my location, but I am on Bocelli Lane here in Reading, so I am still on a public street, even though it doesn't look like it, because of course the sun is blaring, as you can tell. So there's only certain places to stand to where, okay, I can still, look into this to make sure this is on, because I use a selfie stick. I don't have, I have a tripod and everything else, but like everything else, though, those things break too easily, But that all being set aside, welcome to the false flag that's been kind of introduced, but they're talking about another one at the same time, and that is, of course, that a fake assassination plot, right? And they're trying to say that Iran is behind all the assassination attempts against Donald Trump because he has had so many attempts on his life, right? They make you believe that, right? Even though the Illuminati card game shows that, he would be targeted, right? That, they would prop him up because these cards look exactly like Donald Trump. So this is your Manchurian candidate, if you will. Courageous leader, I think, was one of the cards, but there was another one where it actually shows him, actually being hit, and it just so happens to be on the side of his cheek, just like what the so-called attempt was, right? So, and then there was other types of shootings, but these are all done to give you the illusion that, Iran's trying to assassinate him, and like everything else, though, even Harrison Smith of InfoWars is saying that Israeli state is trying to assassinate Trump, right? So they got to keep that going. Assassinations work pretty good, but they got another one. Oh, and this is an interesting whammy, right? That apparently that Iran is planning to launch drones using Cuba's space. Yeah, using Cuba to do it, to launch drone attacks against the U.S. Now, Donald Trump, of course, the bunker boy that he is of course, locked down D.C., and reporters are no longer allowed inside the White House at all. So he's totally locked that down. Well, it's in guise of this so-called assassination attempt, right? Because, he's fearing for his life, that there may be an attempt on his life, that Iran might use drone attacks, or that, possibly an assassination attempt, right? Well, that's not what's really going on. What's really going on, as Trump has already said, he let it out weeks ago that we only had 4 more weeks left. Well, guess what? That deadline is on Wednesday, that they run out of oil. And so that's what they're not talking about, except via the alternative media. You're not going to hear about this on Fox News or CNN or ABC or any of that, because they're all, paid parrots, just to echo what, the Pentagon is saying. They're Pentagon mouthpieces, And like everything else, though, whether you're Republican or Democrat, which, if you're in this truth, you ain't neither of those. But nonetheless, though, to give you the illusion that the Democrats and the Republicans are different, right? That's how they spin stories. But they're all on the same team. They're all working with the government, and they're only allowed to give out certain information. Well, they don't want this one leaking out, though, that the U.S. is about to run out of oil.
Look, we're going straight to the facts with numbers, names, and evidence, because this, ladies and gentlemen, is journalism. So look, this is what happened. The United States government has been extracting oil from its strategic reserves as if there were no tomorrow. And the result is that today, they are at 340 million barrels, the lowest level in years since 1983. To give us an idea, Congress set a legal floor of 250 thousand. But the technicians in the sector know that for the system to function as an energy buffer, at least 150 or 200 million have to be safe. We are so close to that limit that in 5 days, 5 or 10 days more or less, if they continue extracting at the current rate, they will hit bottom. And look, it is not that they are extracting a little. In April alone, they released 20 million barrels, barrels. In May, almost 40 million. In June, another 15. And since the escalation against Iran began, they have lost more or less 75 million barrels, 18% of the entire reserve. That is a bloodbath. It is bleeding, an energy bloodbath that is unprecedented. It has never been seen before. No.
The likes of which has never been seen before. How many times have you heard Trump say that, right? But really, truly, though, he's actually projecting what's happened, right? So everybody's going to be feeling this very shortly here, because like everything else, though, you're going to eventually see signs over here, just like you are in Europe and in Russia, which is, whether you look at it as Europe, but nonetheless, though, you're going to see gas stations literally say that they're out of fuel. What do you think that's going to do? All hell is about to break loose. But they're going to lock down everything, right? Because, there was this assassination attempt. They're going to lock down everything because, Iran is conducting drone strikes, which these will all be Mossad type deals. There's no way Iran is able to do this, able to launch drone attacks from Cuba. That's still too far away. So if anything like that happens, it's because the U.S. allowed it to happen. And like everything else, though, the war is on, right? Well, we prefer it to be on rather than this bullshit about the memorandum of understanding that was never going to happen to begin with. We already knew all that, so it's like, yeah, everybody knew that. That is those of us, in the know already knew that it's not going to hold because the scriptures tell you it's not going to hold. When they shall say peace and safety, then come the sudden destruction, right? So they think that that there's going to be, they're going to reopen the routes. Well, as you know, last week, Donald Trump had actually gone into the NATO summit in Ankara and was given a nice gift of a revolver, which all the people there got the revolver. Just pretty much, though, it was a token of appreciation from the President Erdogan of Turkey, to give to everybody, as a parting gift, as an ancient revolver. And Trump, of course, created himself to look like Clint Eastwood in a photo shop of it, and act like he's a long arm of the law. But what they really were there for, though, is to try to discuss routes through Syria and Iraq, going up through Turkey, because they know that the strait is the leverage. That's the leverage that Iran has, so they're looking for alternative ways to sell their oil, to get their oil to go through all those places, to secure a route up through Turkey, ultimately. Is what that Ankara summit was really about. They won't tell you that, but pretty much, though, they had no intentions on making a deal with Iran, because King Bibi told them not to, that there would be no way that he would allow it, right? Because, of course, the first thing, when this whole thing started was, they continued to attack Lebanon anyways. And that's another thing, is that what Trump is also planning to do is to send troops into Beirut, to invade Beirut, to go after Hezbollah. Yeah, he's planning to send soldiers there because Syria told him, no, they're not going to get involved with Hezbollah. They're not going to, fight Hezbollah on behalf of the Israeli state. So the new Syrian interim president, al-Jilani, said no. So the U.S. will be putting boots on the ground to back the Israelis because King Bibi said so, to fight Hezbollah for them. So, hey, another war for the Israeli state. Kim Iverson, who's been on the top of this, actually went into that. And then, of course, like everything else, though, Trump says, we're not going to deal with them anymore. They're scum. He used the word scums and insulted them during the funeral for Ayatollah Khamenei, which many had gathered. There was a huge crowd, that had gathered there, from all parts of the world to mourn and grieve the loss of Ayatollah Khamenei, And like everything else, though, they all vowed revenge for what happened, So this is the days of vengeance that the Most High had spoken of, right? Double unto her as she had done unto you, right? And like everything else, though, you've already been here and talks about, the U.S. wanting to break up with NATO. Well, that's because King Bibi does not want NATO. You know, the Israelis do not want NATO in power. So you see this break off, right? You know, that they want pretty much to be desolate with them. Well, want them to be with them in solidarity. You know, only pledging to the Israeli state, which is why, okay, you know, they're merging militaries, right? You know, the IDF, which we already knew the IDF was involved with training over here. You know, they train ISIS, they train lots of terror groups, and the IDF pretty much is part of the U.S. military. At the end of the day, well, they're just going to merge the two together, formally merging the two militaries together, because you already know that it was the U.S. and the Israeli state, the Zionist state, you know, that launched this war anyways, and launched the war last year. So, like everything else, though, you may as well call it the Zionist Israeli States of America. You know, and a lot of people over here do not support that. So you could see uprisings, you know, very soon, especially when, you know, gas stations run out of fuel. The energy costs are up there. I mean, you know, there's a whole video of Edomites just going, wah, wah, wah. You know, I can't do this, I can't do that. I just can't stand it anymore. How are people not outraged? You know, and just pretty much all fucking wigging out, bugging out. Because, of course, man, this leader, Donald Trump, was never for you. The Most High has given you over to a fierce king, and a cruel Lord rules over you. He doesn't give a shit about you. He's told you time and time again that he doesn't think about you. You know, all he cares about is whether Iran has a weapon or not. He let that out there. He said it publicly. I don't think about any of that at all. All I care about is whether Iran has a nuclear weapon. But I thought that you had destroyed these nuclear facilities, right? Yeah, he puts his foot in his mouth. That's really not about nuclear facilities. Now they're trying to spin the idea that Iran has chemical weapons, even though they're the biggest advocate for, you know, pretty much totally getting rid of chemical weapons. They never used them against Iraq. Iraq used them against them for 8 years straight, but Iran never, ever, because it's against their beliefs, their religious beliefs. In Islam, they don't believe in using chemical weapons, you know, and that's why they still, till this day, will never, ever build a nuclear weapon. If nuclear attacks come on behalf of Iran, it's because Russia did it. You know, Chris Green, he put that out about a week or two ago, that if Trump launches an attacks, you know, against Iran, or even tries to overthrow the government of Iran, Russia will nuke the shit out of America, and that's biblical. Russia will be nuking the shit out of America. So, like everything else, though, he's also approved long-range missiles, Patriot missiles, to be pretty much, you know, that they can produce their own Patriot missiles, long-range missiles to go into Russia. He's pretty much expanded the war against Russia, you know, via Ukraine. So all that's happening as well. You see, like everything else, though, you know, he changed the name, Department of Defense, to the Department of War. Well, they're warlike people. I mean, Carlin said it best. They're warlike people. You know that this country's only been around for less than 250 years, yet it's had more wars than any country on the planet. Yeah, it's only been around this long, but yet it's had more wars. Well, because it's been the hammer of the whole earth, you know. And we believe George Carlin to be a Jake, you know. He just didn't know he was a Jake, but we definitely believe him to be a Jake because, you know, look at the knowledge that he has, right? You know. So, pretty much, though, you know, we're at the very end of this. We know that. And yet they can't deny that there's chariot sightings everywhere, which is why they're undisclosed UFO reports that UFOs are real. Because these chariots are everywhere. They still want to give you the idea that he's a little green man from other planets and all that, you know. They give you the idea of that, or that they're fallen angels. I mean, I've heard many of them speak of reptilians and, you know, fallen angels, you know, to give you the idea of that. But that's just because Esau wants to keep you delusional. But make no mistake, these are the chariots of the Most High. These are the angels of the Most High. They're visiting this place. And they're letting themselves to be seen, right? Ultimately, letting us know that, hey, you know, the Most High Yahweh is keeping His word. That you keep on abiding in us, in Him, in Yahweh Shai HaMashiach. You keep doing the will of Yahweh Shai, you know, and teaching this word. Guess what? We're going to protect you. Even my wife has seen chariots, fleet of them, and I saw a fleet of them too. You know, so we've seen them here. You know, if you're walking around early in the morning and all that, you can probably see them. Will you always see them? No, but they are around. So, you know, that's kind of a guarantee right there, you know. And then I've talked to other people that have been tormented by them, right? You know, the last place I worked out at, an Aqua class, man, he's tormented by them because he's seen so many of them, you know, and he knows that they're real. You see that? That's out there. You're not cuckoo anymore. They're there. You know, they tried to deny this before and say you're cuckoo if you believe in UFOs, which are really the chariots of the Most High. So, like everything else, though, you know, we know that the days of Esau are determined, and that the least of the flock shall draw them out, to draw them into this war. And you can see that this war never ends. It just keeps going on, and yet it's the same rhetoric over and over again. You know, Iran's trying to build a nuclear weapon. Iran has chemical weapons. You know, and Cuba's another country that they want to take down. They're still in a huge blackouts. So if they're in blackouts, how in the fuck is Iran going to even send drones from using Cuba if they're in a blackout, if they don't have enough energy to run everything, right? And that's another thing, though, is that energy is soon going to run out here, and they're going to do rolling blackouts. They've been talking about that. Because when you run out of oil, also your energy infrastructure falls apart. But also think about what's draining them. These data centers, better known as AI data centers, right? These are draining all the energy. So pretty much, though, they're going to steal all your energy, you know. And these waters and everything else is going to be dried up because it takes a lot of water to run these things. And they're noisy as hell. You know, there's people that are complaining, these rich ass Edomites that live in very nice neighborhoods near that. Well, it's become a living hell for them because it's nothing but noise. You know, noise just so high because of how much energy, how many, you know, engines are burning, you know, just to keep that running, to surveil each and every one, you know. But like everything else, though, you know, we know that we're at the end of Esau Edom. And, you know, we can see that we're in the times that the Most High will begin to visit him. So, you know, well, we know that as this place is broken economically, you know, so is everything else, though. It's not you know, it's more bark than bite, you know, and these other countries are saying, have you become as weak as we, you know, saying that, okay, you know, you're more bark and no bite. Iran has definitely humiliated the U.S. in every way possible, you know, and they're trying to say that they're begging for a deal, and you know, that Iran's begging for the deal. And hey, Professor Malandi, he's saying that's bullshit. You know, that pretty much you can't believe anything that you hear from the U.S. side, because that's not true at all. 2 Ezra chapter 15, verse 11. My people are led by the flock to the slaughter. I will not suffer them now to dwell in the land of Egypt, in which modern day Egypt is talking about this place, Babylon. I will bring them with a mighty hand and a stretched out arm, and smite Egypt with plagues as before, and destroy all the land thereof. Okay, when he wiped out Egypt before, the land wasn't destroyed. Pharaoh's armies were destroyed. Well, pretty much though, well, what does it take to create an army anyways? It takes money, doesn't it? It takes an economy to create military. They call it military budgets. So guess what? He's going to wipe all that out. I will bring them with a mighty hand and a stretched out arm, smite Egypt with plagues as before, and destroy all the land thereof. So there's going to be a famine in the land. You know, everything's going to be plagued. Egypt shall mourn, and the foundation of it shall be smitten. Why? Because there's no economy. There's nothing. It has nothing left. But also, the ultimate punishment is when this place is destroyed by nuclear war. That Yahweh shall bring upon it. They that till the ground shall mourn. You know, all the farmers, the farms. And the seed shall fail through the blasting of hell, and with a fearful consolation. You know, knowing that, okay, you know, it's over. You know, we can't harvest anything anymore. They're using human feces right now just to even try to create fertilizers. They're trying to use every other trick, so you know how fucking nasty that is. But that's what these Edomites do, because they don't respect any laws of, you know, things that, okay, sometimes you're supposed to rest the ground. He never gives the ground any rest, you know. So like everything else, so he's trying to do mass production. And it's all failing, so they've resulted to human feces as a fertilizer. Woe to the world and them that dwell therein, for the sword and the destruction draweth nigh. You know, so that means that this third world war is approaching very fast. Now it doesn't seem inevitable, does it? You know, that, okay, there's always talks of a nuclear war. especially using long-range weapons against Russia. Russia showing many times in the North Arctic that they have nuclear submarines and that they have Satan II missiles. Yeah, Satan II missiles that can deploy 72 smaller nukes is what a Satan II missile looks like. And they have them. That it would only take 4 Satan II missiles to totally wipe out Babylon. And they have them. Nobody else has them. Nobody can counter them. For the sword and the destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up and fight against another with swords in their hands. You know, meaning that they're going to turn all guns against each other. For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. You know, so ultimately, they're going to all plunder each other, which shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power. Ultimately, it's going to be hell out here, because everybody's going to have their gun faced at you. They're going to go out with guns blazing. Man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able. Why? Because they're going to have to lock down these cities because it's just too dangerous. You know, they can't protect you there. You know, because of their pride, the cities shall be troubled, and the houses shall be destroyed, and men shall be afraid. You know, because ultimately you're not going to have any protection. And police are going to be probably the most hunted because, hey man, you know, how many have said, show us the cop cam? How many have said, we want disclosure, we want to know who this pig was that shot that dog alone? But how many actually know? And it doesn't even matter whether they do or not. You know, most people can actually look at that and say, okay, that's him. So they'd be able to tell anyways. So they're not going to be safe. They're going to be the most hunted. And guess what, though? It's all going to be chaos because, no, 911, you can forget about that when this time comes. And that's not too far from now. Especially when the economy is gone. You know, as they usher in the new world order. A new digital economy where you can't buy or sell without it. Well, that's going to bring a bunch of chaos. Man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but destroy their houses with the sword and spoil their goods because of lack of bread and for great tribulation. Yeah. A lot of people are not going to get down with the MOTB system. You know, there's going to be a lot of people that are just going to simply rob each other of everything, man. And the Most High did make a promise to his elect that we would be kept from the hour of temptation and that we would have protection. Now, some of us will be martyred. Doesn't mean that the Most High ain't protecting us. He just, you know, pretty much means that, okay, you know, we'll be the first to be resurrected, right? You know, in that first 1,000 years. But, like everything else, though, this is all going to be changing very soon. And we knew after the 4th of July that we were getting close to that very end. You know, that they've been saying that they're going to run out of fuel. You know, that the fuel reserves. Now, does it mean it's out of fuel completely? No, but what it does mean, however, though, is that they're not going to be able to produce any new fuel, and eventually out of fuel will be seen at gas stations. This is going to take place, you know, not all at once, but systematically, because this is what they want to usher in their new world order. You know, you have to get rid of the old world order and to usher in a new one, you know, and this whole digital system has to be set up. That's why, you know, cash is becoming, a lot of places won't even take cash anymore. You see that all that's set up, and that's all for a reason, you know, and these apps fucking suck. Taco Bell fucking sucks because it's all app based. These apps fucking suck. The kiosks suck, you know, and you can't get no service. And a lot of places have been turned over to AI answering machines. Don't even get me started on that shit, you know. And then they got AI robots. Both BMW and Mitsubishi have AI robots doing the assembly line. So guess what? They don't need humans for that. So there's no work to be found. You know, all this stuff, you got all this education, all this shit to deal with. Guess what? They got AI robots now to take over the jobs that you once might have been able to get. You know, because working in a car factory might have been pretty good. Working for GM might have been pretty good, you know. And they're going to be replacing people very soon. This artificial intelligence is to replace people. And then not to mention, they got RoboCops, you know. And we're going to see a lot more of those, too. It's going to be like iRobot, man. You know, and you can't stop them, you know. Yeah, you're going to see a lot of chappy-looking RoboCops that can't even, you can't do anything to stop, and they never sleep, you know. So all hell's about to break loose. Jacob's trouble, it's not coming, it's already here. You got this fierce king and cruel lord that doesn't give a shit about his own people, let alone how much he hates you Jakes, and he's said it time and time again, you know, how much he fucking hates you. You know, so hey, you 2/3 that ain't right. Well, guess what though? You know, the Most High is going to let this fierce king and cruel lord and these Edomites have their way with you. You know, you might die even before the lake of fire. But ultimately, you take that MOTB, you will die in the lake of fire, because that's the ultimate punishment that Yahweh has, upon this place. And Yahweh Shai and the angels are going to carry it out, seeing the destruction of this place. This place is about to become a lake of fire. So, buckle up, because it will happen in our lifetime. It's inevitable. The days are determined. So we've been telling you that Babylon the Great is broken down, and that it can't stand anymore, because, well, for one, it's not even united anymore. Most people weren't even turning up for events on the 4th of July. And the ones that was a much smaller crowd than what you see on TV, believe it or not. A lot of them weren't even turning up in D.C. because they fucking hate Donald Trump just as much, because he's a fierce king and cruel lord. He doesn't give a shit about you, and everybody knows that. And they're feeling that. Revelation chapter 14, verse 8. And there followed an angel saying, Babylon the Great has fallen, that great city, because she made the nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Ultimately, because they had to do as Babylon does. Do like the Babylonians do. And everything, especially that faggot shit. You got all that faggot shit going on. You got, all the other shit too. The dirty money. They are engaged in every unlawful deed. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast and his image, what is the beast and his image? Well, that's talking about ultimately the New World Order. So you go along with it and you get yourself chipped, right? And receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, receiving the chip, receiving the MOTB. The same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of the Most High, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. See, like everything else, though, he has an indignation for this place. And ultimately, for Esau Edom altogether, in the heart of Esau Edom is Babylon the Great. And it shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. Ultimately, talking about when Yahweh Shai and the angels come here. First to gather his elect, but also to destroy this place. And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up forever and ever. In other words, this is a fire that just continues to burn and doesn't get put out so easily. And they have no rest day nor night, who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receive the mark of his name, ultimately receives the RFID, which is going to be mandated very shortly throughout all this. That's what all this is about, is creating a crisis, and order out of chaos has always been their motto. So, we've been preparing for quite some time. We've been telling you what's going to happen. Eventually, there's going to come a time when we won't be able to, because, all right, the Most High will not be holding it back anymore. So, hopefully, this has all been edifying. For that, I want to say, Barak the Yahweh, Barak the Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakakadash, Wa Ba Babal. Brakathum, Jehovah elect. Shalom.